Welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown, where each time we meet, we run down the IT news of the week with a variable degree of snarkiness. I'm your host, Stephen Foskett from Gestalt IT, and joining me today is a special guest co-host, my friend Max Mortellaro. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So today is World Meteorological Day, and I know that all of us would love it if the meteorological sciences could tell us what tomorrow's weather will be like. But one thing I can tell you is we've got a lot of news this week, so let's dive in.
Exactly. So, Stephen, SiFive announced that they've raised $175 million in a Series F funding round, and it's bringing the company's valuation to $2.5 billion, and they're getting set up for an IPO. SiFive is a pioneer in the world of RISC-V computing, and they're an emerging open source competitor for ARM. So far, it's been more of a theoretical challenger, but do you think that with this investment will put it kind of the RISC-V on the map?
Yeah, this is an interesting question because as everybody who's watched the rundown or followed the enterprise tech space knows, ARM is really making waves in enterprise computing, not just in mobile devices. Of course, everybody is aware of Apple's work with ARM, but even if you look at the other ARM licensees and ARM itself, they're developing cores that really are competitive with x86. And there are a lot of companies now working on bringing ARM devices into the server space. But ARM is also a huge, huge part of the component ecosystem. In other words, systems that I guess technically are CPUs, but aren't really CPUs, like the signature things. Essentially, there are ARM processors in almost every device and almost every component of every device, whether it's hard drives and network cards to devices in car dashboards and just all over the place. So RISC-V is an open source competitor for ARM, essentially. The idea is that they would be able to have an alternative to the ARM instruction set, which, although is widely used, it is proprietary and license-based. And the idea would be that they would have an alternative to that ecosystem. So far, it's gained traction mainly in the storage space. Now, it's not widely known, but a lot of hard drives and SSDs are now starting to use RISC-V cores instead of ARM, mainly because they can be customized and the licensing is cheaper. But another place we're seeing RISC-V taking off is in high-performance computing and AI and machine learning. And this is really interesting because as a open platform, companies are free to add their own high-performance instructions to the chip. So essentially, you've got a basic CPU that can do sort of the regular operating system type processing or embedded OS processing. And then that chip will have some special secret sauce kind of instructions that perform really, really well at this task or that. And that seems to be where this platform is gaining traction. So RISC-V, SiFive is basically the signature enabler of these things. It's a company that's been formed to try to exploit this instruction set, try to compete. And frankly, it's looking pretty good. So they raised a lot more money. They've got funding. They've got development efforts out there. And I think we're looking at a potential here to really compete with ARM, not just in embedded systems, but even perhaps in specialized high-performance niches like machine learning. So where will it go? I think that RISC-V is on the map. Max, big news this week from Okta, whose authenticators are used by companies like FedEx and Moody's to provide access to their networks. Okta has been hacked, and this may have affected their customers. The scope of the breach is unclear, and it could still have major consequences across many companies that rely on the San Francisco-based company to manage their networks and applications. This hack has been handled probably pretty poorly, in my mind, by Okta. And how do you think this could affect the company, its products, its users, as well as the world in general?
Well, there's an interesting thing in that story is that usually you will see hackers which will try to attack directly a company and try to breach to compromise people in an organization. But here, I think what's really interesting in the Okta story is that they went after a security provider and went through them as a kind of a man in the middle somehow attack, because the Okta is providing these authentication services to these companies. So they went for the I wouldn't say maybe the low hanging fruit somehow, but the way they did that is quite smart, because they say that Okta has around 40,000 customers, and around 2.5% of them were maybe affected by that. So obviously, it's a very concerning thing if you're a security company and you get breached. However, what can you really do with that? That's, can you strengthen more and more? Do you need to put more scrutiny on your third-party providers, third-party employees, and so on? It's to some point, I'm kind of wondering if it's really something that we have a way to effectively solve. I mean, unless you're really putting through drastic measure and so on. But the bottom line is that if you're a security company, then it's expected out of you automatically that you have tougher, more thorough security checks on people and procedures to access than a regular company would have. So another story for you, Stephen. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has resulted not only in the cyber war that we all expected, but in fact the Biden administration has been saying that a response is kind of looming. The threat is looming towards the Western world. So a recent CISA built-in, along with an announcement at the White House, has told companies to prepare themselves because Russia may be on the verge of launching a massive attack against US and allied interests in the world to retaliate against the sanctions which have been put on them. Do you think that this threat of cyber war with Russia is serious?
Definitely. And in fact, I think the biggest surprise to me so far with the Ukrainian invasion is the fact that Russia has not apparently used their cyber war capabilities very widely there. And one of the things that we've heard is that the US sent a rapid response team to Ukraine back in the fall to try to help protect some of the Ukrainian infrastructure from Russian cyber attacks. And that may have worked, or it may be that Russia is still perplexingly not using this technology. We'll see. But that being said, the country is very angry about the sanctions that have been placed upon it because of this invasion. And I think the Biden administration is right to be warning both Americans and foreign governments to be prepared for a Russian counterattack. I will also mention that the Biden administration's predictions about the Ukrainian invasion were 100% accurate and now look pretty prescient given what happened afterward. I know a lot of people were skeptical that Russia would invade. The US government said, no, we have intelligence that says they will. This is what's going to happen. And that's what happened. The fact that the same people are now saying we have intelligence that says that Russia is about to launch a massive cyber attack in the US and its allies, I'm going to take that seriously. I would strongly recommend clicking through this link and reading this, quote, shields up briefing from the CISA. Now, a lot of the things that they're recommending are things that you already should be doing. Making sure that you're validating remote access and making sure software is up to date and that you have, ports and protocols disabled and all that kind of stuff. But really, I think that this is a bully pulpit opportunity for the folks in the audience who are generally IT practitioners, IT pros, to basically to raise this flag internally and say, look, it's not just me saying that I'm worried about our security. It is the US government. It is the CISA. It is international organizations. We have to take this seriously, and we have to get on it right now. In fact, right now may be a little too late because, frankly, the cyber warriors may already be in your network. So basically, look at this report, take it seriously, raise the flag, and try to do something about this. Because like I said, they were right about the invasion of Ukraine, and I suggest that they may end up being right about this as well. Turning to some exciting announcements, at Storage Field Day, Vast Data gave the delegates a sneak peek at their new Hyperscale-inspired scale-out storage platform, codenamed Ceres. the embargo is up and we can talk about it. So let's take a deep dive into this cool thing. It leverages the so-called ruler SSDs from Solidigm, which is the Intel spinoff with SK Hynix that we talked about on the rundown before. It also uses Bluefield connectivity from Mellanox, which is, of course, part of NVIDIA, and a chassis from hyperscale provider AIC to build a really cool next-generation platform. Will vast data launch beyond the stratosphere with this Ceres platform?
Well, Vast Data is a company that we've all been following because they have this really cool way of putting things together. They are very efficient. They provide fantastic performance, and they have this architecture which uses Optane or storage class memory and QLC drives and stores the data very efficiently. I think they're already very successful in what they do at the scale that they're going at. But I do think that it could give an extra boost and maybe, as you say, launch into the stratosphere. And the reason is that what they're trying to achieve is deliver very high performance while providing QLC flash economics. So providing a very, let's say, affordable dollar per gigabyte kind of ratio using, as we said before, using QLC. The fact that they will be architecting the solution to use newer components such as ARM, for example, or this Bluefield chip, which is supposed to be very much more efficient on the energy costs and so on, would probably be appealing, especially if you look at the size of customers that they have and the size of installations. I think the last time I was talking with Howard about that, he was telling me that they have very large deployments. So when you're deploying at scale and you get those efficiencies, and it kind of plays in your book, compared to the competition. So I think it's really interesting. Also, the fact that they're able to just go beyond just providing storage, but provide a kind of an integrated solution which addresses, emerging, not really emerging, but bleeding edge use cases. I mean, fast technology, AI, ML, and so on. It's really great because companies want to look at this validation and differentiation when they see those things. They want to see the partnerships with NVIDIA and so on. So I think it's really a big thing for them. Right. And Stephen, I have got a last one for you, and which is around Datto going private. So data security and protection company Datto looks to be going private just a year and a half after their IPO. So the company isn't as high profile as their competitors, like Acronis and Veeam, but is very popular with its customers. So the stock has not performed as well as expected, and the company is looking for more private equity money. So do you think that a takeover or a buyout from a competitor is more imminent?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an interesting story because Datto is one of those companies that isn't all that familiar to many people, but has found a really successful niche with some of their customers, mainly through managed service providers. And this MSP business model, it helps them because, of course, it means that they have the ability to reach a really, really broad market, but it hurts them because it is, frankly, a really kind of below the radar go-to-market approach, which means that most customers aren't really familiar with Datto. But that being said, the company is very successful. It's done really, really well over the years, but quietly. So a couple of years ago, they decided that they were going to go IPO, and they did. And that has been, it was okay at first, but it really hasn't gone anywhere because the company, although successful, isn't wildly successful. It's not high profile. I think investors just kind of didn't even notice Datto out there. And unfortunately, and part of that process, it looks like they may have sort of overextended themselves from a corporate perspective in order to make that IPO happen, which means that now you've got private equity and investors starting to sniff around the company and say, hey, you got to do something here to give us a return on our investment. Unfortunately, that means that this is probably going to result in either a private equity deal that may end up kind of tearing up the company or merging it with something else in private equity, or an outright takeover. Now, that last bit, I think, is actually the most exciting prospect here. Again, Datto has some good technology. They've got good customers. If they were taken over by somebody in the somebody larger, let's say, a Veritas or somebody like that, that would actually be a pretty good outcome for everybody involved, especially for their customers, because it would mean that they would have long-term support for what is really a long-term commitment in terms of data protection. So honestly, I don't think this is bad news for Datto, but it's not great news either.
Okay. So we're going to be taking a closer look now at a story from NVIDIA. Jensen Huang is back with another NVIDIA GTC keynote, and they're launching the next generation Hopper GPU architecture and a raft of new products for the cloud, HPC, data center, automotive, and beyond. So the keynote was loaded with buzzword-filled demos, including a long segment on the Omniverse, autonomous driving, and digital twins, and even some talk on quantum computing. So, but it was the Hopper GPU architecture that's really stole the attention because it's delivering over 3 times the performance of Ampere while sucking twice the power. What should we make of GTC Spring 2022, Stephen?
Well, I love NVIDIA GTC because it's one of those, well, frankly, Jensen's keynote is the thing that I look forward to because they always do a great job with it. It's always interesting and fun. It's always filled with forward-looking demos and clever ways of showing the real-world impact of technology. And NVIDIA absolutely did not disappoint this time as well. Honestly, the keynote is just fun to watch for a nerd like me. But that being said, looking at this keynote, it was obviously the Hopper keynote. So those of you who follow NVIDIA already know this, but NVIDIA basically, they have basic GPU architectures, platforms that they build, and every couple of years they rev it to sort of the next generation. So we saw Ampere a few years ago. Now we've got Hopper, which is really the next leap forward. Now, some of the stuff is obvious. We've got PCI Express Gen 5. We've got HBM3 memory. We've got the next generation of NVLink, which is their proprietary interlink. But overall, the picture was very interesting. So as an observer of what happens in enterprise tech, the thing that I keyed in on is the fact that the performance level has leaped just tremendously here. But so has the power consumption. As you mentioned, we're looking at a part that is either 350 or 700 watts in its sort of signature form. A 350 watt PCIe card is kind of nuts. I mean, that's legal, but only barely in a PCIe card. And how the heck is that going to be cooled? I mean, we're going to be looking at some pretty exotic stuff, liquid cooling, and not just any old liquid cooling, like really aggressive liquid cooling. Now, that doesn't mean that Hopper is useless or hot or power, no, we're going to see trimmed down versions of it that consume regular power amounts and so on. And then that's fine. But overall, this thing is absolutely nuts. This is pushing it all the way to the limit and maybe even a little bit beyond when it comes to some of the hyperscale platforms. I'm not sure how this thing is really going to work in practice, but I know that NVIDIA has the engineering expertise to make it work. It's just going to be an interesting rollout for some of the OEMs to get these things going. But looking a little deeper at Hopper, and there are some interesting things to call out. And the first thing that I'm going to call out is the fact that Hopper has a transformer engine. Now, unfortunately, Optimus Prime was not involved, but effectively, transformer is a really up-and-coming and interesting approach to machine learning. And it has shown great progress in sort of in theoretical terms. Well, it's built in to the Hopper platform. And I'm really excited to see where they go with that, because again, this is sort of next generation machine learning stuff. And NVIDIA has added specific hardware instruction sets to make it happen, which is tremendous. Another really cool element of this new platform is that the Hopper includes dynamic programming support, which is another nascent and emerging field in computer science. And the fact that they have this built into the hardware is really exceptional. Finally, a third thing that I'm going to call out about Hopper specifically is the fact that it's got all this security stuff in here. Essentially, back in the day, GPUs were kind of an open book. They didn't really support confidential computing, and that caused some issues if you were going to use them in any kind of multi-tenant situation, because somebody could theoretically use a programming technique to kind of spy on what else is going on that GPU. That's all probably a thing of the past with this new platform, because they support confidential computing, and they will be rolling out multi-tenancy as well. So overall, I'm pretty excited about Hopper. Max, do you have some comments about the GTC keynote or any of the specifics that have been launched?
I wouldn't have any cons against that. I think it's really a fantastic technology that we're seeing, and as with each new generation of GPUs, we see how the technology is maturing, how they're adding function capabilities and moving towards hardware-based instruction sets. It's really interesting. What I think as you pointed out at the beginning, the most interesting challenge is how they're going to sort out cooling and power to that. And I'm really thinking, if they're going to, if the current way the cards are going to be deployed, either as PCI Express card or mezzanine cards for some servers, if it's not just a kind of a transient step until a new, more dedicated architecture is figured out. I'm not thinking that they're going to reinvent the wheel in terms of the interlinks and PCI Express and so on, but more if they're going to build some more efficient, form factors to run that in the data center. Because as you said, we're really reaching the limits, and it's really insane. 350 watts or 700 watts just out of one card is absolutely crazy and mind blowing. So that's pretty much all from my end on that aspect.
Another thing I'll call out in terms of the announcements there was some of the really great ecosystem ways that NVIDIA is kind of pushing this technology out. They're not just developing a chip, they're developing ways of making these things happen, whether it's HGX for OEMs, DGX, the sort of integrated pods, and also some of the ways that NVIDIA is incorporating this technology into other areas of the company. Now, as you'll remember, I mentioned Mellanox earlier. NVIDIA bought them, and Mellanox is probably the leader in high-performance SmartNICs right now. NVIDIA, one of the things that they showed here was called the CNX, which is basically, it's kind of nuts. It's a Hopper H100 on the same card as the ConnectX-7, which is Mellanox's next generation SmartNIC. And again, this thing is wild. We're talking a 350-watt PCIe card with integrated GPU and SmartNIC functionality. I don't know who's going to use this. I don't know how they're going to use it, but whatever it is, it's going to be very, very cool. One more thing, and I've got to say, chef's kiss for the nerd cred here in introducing this product. So you might remember NVIDIA Grace, which is their ARM-based CPU, which is not intended to replace Xeon, but intended to be sort of a hyper disaggregated compute platform for workloads that don't use GPU. They announced this last year. There was a lot of shirt rending over NVIDIA's attacking Intel, but that's totally not what happened. Instead, NVIDIA is coming out with basically another offload engine that just happens to be an ARM CPU with many, many, many cores. Well, remember, that was called Grace. This product is called Hopper, and together they are, yes, Grace Hopper. So great Easter egg there for nerds. The Grace Hopper is probably the nerdiest, coolest thing that they announced at GTC. So essentially, it is an NVIDIA Grace, which is a massive ARM CPU. You can get 72 or 144 cores of ARM CPU with maybe a terabyte of memory, plus one of these crazy Hopper GPUs on the same card, and basically build a massive disaggregated supercomputer out of these things using NVLink, using smart Ethernet or InfiniBand with some of the other things. Just cool stuff. And again, I love the nerd call out.
Yes, exactly. Who doesn't? So, Stephen, let's talk about the week ahead. So today we have Security Field Day 7 starting today from the 23rd to the 25th of March. And you can figure out what's going on, who's presenting, who are the delegates at techfieldday.com.
And next week, I'm going to be in Las Vegas for Aruba's Atmosphere Conference. Now, this is one of our favorite conferences. It's really big for mobility, but now for SD-WAN as well. And you'll be able to tune in on March 28th through 31st. You can register to be part of Atmosphere online. You could even come to Vegas and say hello if you happen to be there. Or you can tune in on Tuesday and Wednesday for some special Tech Field Day sessions from that on the usual Tech Field Day channels. And also coming back in April, we've got Tech Field Day 25. The whole agenda, the complete list of delegates, everything is online now. Go to Tech Field Day and see that. And again, that's Wednesday through Friday, April 6th through 8th. So thank you for joining us for the Gestalt IT Rundown. We're glad to have you here every Wednesday as we run down the week's news. This discussion is available as a podcast as well, so look in your favorite podcast feed or on YouTube at youtube.com/GestaltIT-video. Max, is there anything exciting going on for you in the coming weeks?
Well, I'm going to be at Tech Field Day 25, so I'm really much looking forward to it. And I'll be seeing you all in a couple of weeks online on the Tech Field Day 25 sessions. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, I'm going to be at Aruba Atmosphere as well as Tech Field Day 25. And it's always great to have a Tech Field Day event because just like the rundown, we get such a broad spectrum of companies presenting. So we'll be back next week to talk about all the IT news of the week that was. And hopefully we'll be having our regular host, Tom Hollingsworth, back and the rest of the Gestalt IT family here. I'd like to take a quick moment as well to give a shout out to our producer, Abby. Abby is leaving us here this week, but she will be leaving the production of the Gestalt IT Rundowns in the capable hands of Mr. Corey Dierig. So if you're interested, you can contact them as well. You can find their information online. Thank you, Abby, for all your work. And Corey, I'm really excited to see what you do with the Rundown going forward. So for us here at Gestalt IT, thank you for joining us and have a super awesome day.